After the death of their leader Joshua, the Israelites sought guidance from the Lord, asking who should lead the continued effort to drive out the remaining Canaanites. The tribe of Judah was chosen to go first, and they allied with the tribe of Simeon. Together they won several battles, capturing key cities like Bezek and Jerusalem, though they couldn't fully drive out the inhabitants in some areas. They defeated various Canaanite kings and took over more territory, including Hebron and Debir. Caleb gave his daughter Achsah in marriage to Othniel, his nephew, as a reward for conquering a city, and she requested additional land and springs of water. Despite many victories, the tribes struggled to fully conquer all their allotted regions. In many cases, they allowed the Canaanites to remain, sometimes forcing them into labor rather than removing them entirely. This pattern of incomplete obedience and cohabitation set the stage for future struggles. The Lord's angel went from Gilgal to Bochim and gave the Israelites this message from the Lord. I promised your ancestors that I would give this land to their families, and I brought your people here from Egypt. We made an agreement that I promised never to break, and you promised not to make any peace treaties with the other nations that live in the land. Besides that, you agreed to tear down the altars where they sacrificed to their idols. Why haven't you kept your promise? And so I'll stop helping you defeat your enemies. Instead, they will be there to trap you into worshipping their idols. The Israelites started crying loudly, and they offered sacrifices to the Lord. From then on, they called that place Crying. Even though Joshua was gone, the Israelites were faithful to the Lord during the lifetime of those men who had been leaders with Joshua, and who had seen the wonderful things the Lord had done for Israel. After a while, the people of Joshua's generation died, and the next generation did not know the Lord or any of the things he had done for Israel. The Lord had brought their ancestors out of Egypt, and they had worshipped him. But now the Israelites stopped worshipping the Lord and worshipped the idols of Baal and Astarte, as well as the idols of other gods from nearby nations. The Lord was so angry with the Israelites that he let other nations raid Israel and steal their crops and other possessions. Enemies were everywhere, and the Lord always let them defeat Israel in battle. The Lord had warned Israel he would do this, and now the Israelites were miserable. From time to time, the Lord would choose special revolutionary leaders known as judges. These judges would lead the Israelites into battle and defeat the enemies that made raids on them. In years gone by, the Israelites had been faithful to the Lord, but now they were quick to be unfaithful and to refuse even to listen to these judges. The Israelites disobeyed the Lord, and instead of worshiping him, they worshipped other gods. When enemies made life miserable for the Israelites, the Lord felt sorry for them. He would choose a judge and help that judge rescue Israel from its enemies. The Lord was kind to Israel as long as that judge lived. But afterwards, the Israelites would become even more sinful than their ancestors had been. The Israelites were stubborn. They simply would not stop worshipping other gods or following their teachings. The Lord was angry with Israel and said, "The Israelites have broken the agreement I made with their ancestors. They won't obey me, so I'll stop helping them defeat their enemies. Israel still had a lot of enemies when Joshua died, and I'm going to let those enemies stay. I'll use them to test Israel, because then I can find out if Israel will worship and obey me as their ancestors did." That's why the Lord had not let Joshua get rid of those enemy nations all at once. And the Lord had another reason for letting these enemies stay. The Israelites needed to learn how to fight in war, just as their ancestors had done. Each new generation would have to learn by fighting the Philistines and their 5 rulers, as well as the Canaanites, the Sidonians, and the Hivites that lived in the Lebanon mountains from Mount Baal Hermon to Hamath Pass. Moses had told the Israelites what the Lord had commanded them to do, and now the Lord was using these nations to find out if Israel would obey. But they refused. And some of them even married Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites who lived all around them. That's how they started worshipping foreign gods. Othniel. The Israelites sinned against the Lord by forgetting him and worshipping idols of Baal and Astarte. This made the Lord angry, so he let Israel be defeated by King Cushan-Rishathaim of northern Syria, who ruled Israel 8 years, and made everyone pay taxes. The Israelites begged the Lord for help, and so he chose Othniel to rescue them. Othniel was the son of Caleb's younger brother, Kenaz. The Spirit of the Lord took control of Othniel, and he led Israel in a war against Cushan-Rishathaim. The Lord let Othniel win, and Israel was at peace until Othniel died about 40 years later. Ehud. Once more the Israelites started disobeying the Lord, so he let them be defeated by King Eglon of Moab, who had joined forces with the Ammonites and the Amalekites to attack Israel. Eglon and his army captured Jericho. Then he ruled Israel for 18 years and forced the Israelites to pay heavy taxes. The Israelites begged the Lord for help, and the Lord chose Ehud from the Benjamin tribe to rescue them. They put Ehud in charge of taking the taxes to King Eglon, but before Ehud went, he made a double-edged dagger. Ehud was left-handed, so he strapped the dagger to his right thigh, where it was hidden under his robes. Ehud and some other Israelites took the taxes to Eglon, who was a very fat man. As soon as they gave the taxes to Eglon, Ehud said it was time to go home. Ehud went with the other Israelites as far as the statues at Gilgal. Then he turned back and went upstairs to the room where Eglon had his throne. Ehud said, "Your Majesty, I need to talk with you in private." Eglon replied, "Don't say anything yet." His officials left the room and Eglon stood up as Ehud came closer. "Yes," Ehud said, "I have a message for you from God." Ehud pulled out the dagger with his left hand and shoved it so far into Eglon's stomach that even the handle was buried in his fat. Ehud left the dagger there. Then after closing and locking the doors to the room, he climbed through a window onto the porch and left. When the king's officials came back and saw that the doors were locked, they said, "The king is probably inside relieving himself." They stood there waiting until they felt foolish, but Eglon still didn't open the doors. Finally, they unlocked the doors and found King Eglon lying dead on the floor. But by that time, Ehud had already escaped past the statues. Ehud went to the town of Sirah in the hill country of Ephraim and started blowing a trumpet as a signal to call the Israelites together. When they came, he shouted, "Follow me! The Lord will help us defeat the Moabites." The Israelites followed Ehud down to the Jordan Valley, and they captured the places where people crossed the river on the way to Moab. They would not let anyone go across, and before the fighting was over, they killed about 10,000 Moabite warriors. Not one escaped alive. Moab was so badly defeated that it was a long time before they were strong enough to attack Israel again, and Israel was at peace for 80 years. Shamgar. Shamgar, the son of Anath, was the next to rescue Israel. In one battle, he used a sharp wooden pole to kill 600 Philistines. Deborah and Barak. After the death of Ehud, the Israelites again started disobeying the Lord. So the Lord let the Canaanite king Jabin of Hazor conquer Israel. Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, lived in Harosheth Hagoyim. Jabin's army had 900 iron chariots, and for 20 years he made life miserable for the Israelites, until finally they begged the Lord for help. Deborah, the wife of Lapidoth, was a prophet and a leader of Israel during those days. She would sit under Deborah's palm tree between Ramah and Bethel, in the hill country of Ephraim, where Israelites would come, and ask her to settle their legal cases. One day, Barak the son of Abinoam was in Kadesh in Naphtali, and Deborah sent word for him to come and talk with her. When he arrived, she said, "I have a message for you from the Lord God of Israel. You are to get together an army of 10,000 men from the Naphtali and Zebulun tribes and lead them to Mount Tabor. The Lord will trick Sisera into coming out to fight you at the Kishon River. Sisera will be leading King Jabin's army as usual, and they will have their chariots, but the Lord has promised to help you defeat them." "I'm not going unless you go," Barak told her. "All right, I'll go," she replied, "but I'm warning you that the Lord is going to let a woman defeat Sisera, and no one will honor you for winning the battle." Deborah and Barak left for Kadesh, where Barak called together the troops from Zebulun and Naphtali. 10,000 soldiers gathered there, and Barak led them out from Kadesh. Deborah went too. At this time, Heber of the Kenite clan was living near the village of Oak in Zaanannim, not far from Kadesh. The Kenites were descendants of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, but Heber had moved and had set up his tents away from the rest of the clan. When Sisera learned that Barak had led an army to Mount Tabor, he called his troops together and got all 900 iron chariots ready. Then he led his army away from Harosheth HaGoyim to the Kishon River. Deborah shouted, "Barak, it's time to attack Sisera, because today the Lord is going to help you defeat him. In fact, the Lord has already gone on ahead to fight for you." Barak led his 10,000 troops down from Mount Tabor, and during the battle, the Lord confused Sisera, his chariot drivers, and his whole army. Everyone was so afraid of Barak and his army that even Sisera jumped down from his chariot and tried to escape. Barak's forces went after Sisera's chariots and army as far as Harosheth HaGoyim. Sisera's entire army was wiped out. Only Sisera escaped. He ran to Heber's camp because Heber and his family had a peace treaty with the king of Hazor. Sisera went to the tent that belonged to Jael, Heber's wife. She came out to greet him and said, "Come in, sir. Please come on in. Don't be afraid." After they had gone inside, Sisera lay down, and Jael covered him with a blanket. "Could I have a little water?" he asked. "I'm thirsty." Jael opened a leather bottle and poured him some milk. Then she covered him back up. "Stand at the entrance to the tent," Sisera told her. "If someone comes by and asks if anyone is inside, tell them no." Sisera was exhausted and soon fell fast asleep. Jael took a hammer and drove a tent peg through his head into the ground, and he died. Meanwhile, Barak had been following Sisera, and Jael went out to meet him. "The man you're looking for is inside," she said. "Come in, and I'll show him to you." They went inside, and there was Sisera, dead and stretched out with a tent peg through his skull. That same day, God defeated the Canaanite king Jabin while the Israelites looked on, and his army was no longer powerful enough to attack the Israelites. Jabin grew weaker while the Israelites kept growing stronger, until at last the Israelites destroyed him. Deborah and Barak sing a victory song praising God for Israel's triumph over Canaanite oppression and honoring those who willingly fought in the battle. There was peace in Israel for about 40 years. Then once again the Israelites started disobeying the Lord, so he let the nation of Midian control Israel for 7 years. The Midianites were so cruel that many Israelites ran to the mountains and hid in caves. Every time the Israelites planted crops, the Midianites invaded Israel together with the Amalekites and other eastern nations. They rode in on their camels, set up their tents, and then let their livestock eat the crops as far as the town of Gaza. The Midianites stole food, sheep, cattle, and donkeys. Like a swarm of locusts, they could not be counted, and they ruined the land wherever they went. The Midianites took almost everything that belonged to the Israelites, and the Israelites begged the Lord for help. Then the Lord sent a prophet to them with this message: "I am the Lord God of Israel, so listen to what I say. You were slaves in Egypt, but I set you free and led you out of Egypt into this land. And when nations here made life miserable for you, I rescued you and helped you get rid of them and take their land. I am your God, and I told you not to worship Amorite gods, even though you are living in the land of the Amorites, but you refused to listen." Gideon. One day an angel from the Lord went to the town of Ophrah and sat down under the big tree that belonged to Joash, a member of the Abiezer clan. Joash's son Gideon was nearby, threshing grain in a shallow pit, where he could not be seen by the Midianites. The angel appeared and spoke to Gideon, "The Lord is helping you, and you are a strong warrior." Gideon answered, "Please don't take this wrong, but if the Lord is helping us, then why have all of these awful things happened? We've heard how the Lord performed miracles and rescued our ancestors from Egypt. But those things happened long ago. Now the Lord has abandoned us to the Midianites." Then the Lord himself said, "Gideon, you will be strong, because I am giving you the power to rescue Israel from the Midianites." Gideon replied, "But how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest one in Manasseh, and everyone else in my family is more important than I am." "Gideon," the Lord answered, "you can rescue Israel, because I'm going to help you. Defeating the Midianites will be as easy as beating up one man." Gideon said, "It's hard to believe that I'm actually talking to the Lord. Please do something so I'll know that you really are the Lord, and wait here until I bring you an offering." "All right, I'll wait," the Lord answered. Gideon went home and killed a young goat, then started boiling the meat. Next, he opened a big sack of flour and made it into thin bread. When the meat was done, he put it in a basket and poured the broth into a clay cooking pot. He took the meat, the broth, and the bread, and placed them under the big tree. God's angel said, "Gideon, put the meat and the bread on this rock and pour the broth over them." Gideon did as he was told. The angel was holding a walking stick, and he touched the meat and the bread with the end of the stick. Flames jumped from the rock and burned up the meat and the bread. When Gideon looked, the angel was gone. Gideon realized that he had seen one of the Lord's angels. "Oh," he moaned, "now I'm going to die." "Calm down," the Lord told Gideon. "There's nothing to be afraid of. You're not going to die." Gideon built an altar for worshiping the Lord and called it "The Lord Calms Our Fears." That night the Lord spoke to Gideon again. "Get your father's second-best bull, the one that's 7 years old. Use it to pull down the altar where your father worships Baal and cut down the sacred pole next to the altar. Then build an altar for worshiping me on the highest part of the hill where your town is built. Use layers of stones for my altar, not just a pile of rocks. Cut up the wood from the pole, make a fire, kill the bull, and burn it as a sacrifice to me." Gideon chose 10 of his servants to help him, and they did everything God had said. But since Gideon was afraid of his family and the other people in Ophrah, he did it all at night. When the people of the town got up the next morning, they saw that Baal's altar had been knocked over, and the sacred pole next to it had been cut down. Then they noticed the new altar covered with the remains of the sacrificed bull. "Who could have done such a thing?" they asked. And they kept on asking, until finally someone told them, "Gideon the son of Joash did it." The men of the town went to Joash and said, "Your son Gideon knocked over Baal's altar and cut down the sacred pole next to it. Hand him over so we can kill him." The crowd pushed closer and closer, but Joash replied, "Are you trying to take revenge for Baal? Are you trying to rescue Baal? If you are, you will be the ones who are put to death, and it will happen before another day dawns. If Baal really is a god, let him take his own revenge on someone who tears down his altar." That same day, Joash changed Gideon's name to Jerubbaal, explaining, "He tore down Baal's altar, so let Baal take revenge himself." All the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern nations got together and crossed the Jordan River. Then they invaded the land of Israel and set up camp in Jezreel Valley. The Lord's Spirit took control of Gideon, and Gideon blew a trumpet as a signal for the men in the Abiezer clan to follow him. He also sent messengers to the tribes of Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, telling the men of these tribes to come and join his army. Then they set out toward the enemy camp. Gideon prayed to God, "I know that you promised to help me rescue Israel, but I need proof. Tonight I'll spread a sheepskin on the stone floor of that threshing place over there. If you really will help me rescue Israel, then tomorrow morning let there be dew on the skin, but let the stone floor be dry." And that's just what happened. Early the next morning, Gideon got up and checked the sheepskin. He squeezed out enough water to fill a bowl, but Gideon prayed to God again. "Don't be angry with me," Gideon said. "Let me try this just one more time so I'll really be sure you'll help me. Only this time, let the skin be dry and the stone floor be wet." That night, God made the stone floor wet with dew, but he kept the sheepskin dry. Early the next morning, Gideon and his army got up and moved their camp to Fear Spring. The Midianite camp was to the north, in the valley at the foot of Moreh Hill. The Lord said, "Gideon, your army is too big. I can't let you win with this many soldiers. The Israelites would think that they had won the battle all by themselves, and that I didn't have anything to do with it. So call your troops together and tell them that anyone who is really afraid can leave Mount Gilead and go home." 22,000 men returned home, leaving Gideon with only 10,000 soldiers. "Gideon," the Lord said, "you still have too many soldiers. Take them down to the spring and I'll test them. I'll tell you which ones can go along with you and which ones must go back home." When Gideon led his army down to the spring, the Lord told him, "Watch how each man gets a drink of water. Then divide them into 2 groups, those who lap the water like a dog and those who kneel down to drink." 300 men scooped up water in their hands and lapped it, and the rest knelt to get a drink. The Lord said, "Gideon, your army will be made up of everyone who lapped the water from their hands. Send the others home. I'm going to rescue Israel by helping you and your army of 300 defeat the Midianites." Then Gideon gave these orders. You 300 men stay here. The rest of you may go home, but leave your food and trumpets with us. Gideon's army camp was on top of a hill overlooking the Midianite camp in the valley. That night the Lord said to Gideon, "Get up, attack the Midianite camp. I'm going to let you defeat them. But if you're still afraid, you and your servant Purah should sneak down to their camp. When you hear what the Midianites are saying, you'll be brave enough to attack." Gideon and Purah worked their way to the edge of the enemy camp, where soldiers were on guard duty. The camp was huge. The Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern nations covered the valley like a swarm of locusts, and it would be easier to count the grains of sand on a beach than to count their camels. Gideon overheard one enemy guard telling another, "I had a dream about a flat loaf of barley bread that came tumbling into our camp. It hit the headquarters tent, and the tent flipped over and fell to the ground." The other soldier answered, "Your dream must have been about Gideon, the Israelite commander. It means God will let him and his army defeat the Midianite army and everyone else in our camp." As soon as Gideon heard about the dream and what it meant, he bowed down to praise God. Then he went back to the Israelite camp and shouted, "Let's go! The Lord is going to let us defeat the Midianite army." Gideon divided his little army into 3 groups of 100 men, and he gave each soldier a trumpet and a large clay jar with a burning torch inside. Gideon said, "When we get to the enemy camp, spread out and surround it. Then wait for me to blow a signal on my trumpet. As soon as you hear it, blow your trumpets and shout, 'Fight for the Lord! Fight for Gideon!'" Gideon and his group reached the edge of the enemy camp a few hours after dark, just after the new guards had come on duty. Gideon and his soldiers blew their trumpets and smashed the clay jars that were hiding the torches. The rest of Gideon's soldiers blew the trumpets they were holding in their right hands. Then they smashed the jars and held the burning torches in their left hands. Everyone shouted, "Fight with your swords for the Lord and for Gideon." The enemy soldiers started yelling and tried to run away. Gideon's troops stayed in their positions surrounding the camp and blew their trumpets again. As they did, the Lord made the enemy soldiers pull out their swords and start fighting each other. The enemy army tried to escape from the camp. They ran to Acacia Tree Town towards Zerida, and as far as the edge of the land that belonged to the town of Abel-Meholah near Tabbath. Gideon sent word for more Israelite soldiers to come from the tribes of Naphtali, Asher, and both halves of Manasseh to help fight the Midianites. He also sent messengers to tell all the men who lived in the hill country of Ephraim, "Come and help us fight the Midianites. Put guards at every spring, stream, and well, as far as Beth-barah before the Midianites can get to them, and guard the Jordan River." Troops from Ephraim did exactly what Gideon had asked, and they even helped chase the Midianites on the east side of the Jordan River. These troops captured Raven and Wolf, the 2 Midianite leaders. They killed Raven at a large rock that has come to be known as Raven Rock, and they killed Wolf near a wine pit that has come to be called Wolf Wine Pit. The men of Ephraim brought the heads of the 2 Midianite leaders to Gideon. But the men were really upset with Gideon and complained, "When you went to war with Midian, you didn't ask us to help. Why did you treat us like that?" Gideon answered, "Don't be upset. Even though you came later, you were able to do much more than I did. It's just like the grape harvest. The grapes your tribe doesn't even bother to pick are better than the best grapes my family can grow. Besides, God chose you to capture Raven and Wolf. I didn't do a thing compared to you." By the time Gideon had finished talking, the men of Ephraim had calmed down and were no longer angry with him. After Gideon and his 300 troops had chased the Midianites across the Jordan River, they were exhausted. The town of Succoth was nearby, so he went there and asked, "Please give my troops some food. They are worn out, but we have to keep chasing Zebah and Zalmunna, the 2 Midianite kings." The town leaders of Succoth answered, "Why should we feed your army? We don't know if you really will defeat Zebah and Zalmunna." "Just wait," Gideon said. "After the Lord helps me defeat them, I'm coming back here. I'll make a whip out of thorns and rip the flesh from your bones." After leaving Succoth, Gideon went to Penuel and asked the leaders there for some food. But he got the same answer as he did at Succoth. "I'll come back safe and sound," Gideon said. "But when I do, I'm going to tear down your tower." Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor with an army of 15,000 troops. They were all that was left of the army of the eastern nations, because 120,000 of their warriors had been killed in the battle. Gideon reached the enemy camp by going east along Nomad Road, past Noba and Jogbaha. He made a surprise attack, and the enemy panicked. Zeba and Zalmunna tried to escape, but Gideon chased and captured them. After the battle, Gideon set out for home. As he was going through Heres Pass, he caught a young man who lived in Succoth. Gideon asked him who the town officials of Succoth were, and the young man wrote down 77 names. Gideon went to the town officials and said, "Here are Zeba and Zalmunna. Remember how you made fun of me? You said, 'We don't know if you really will defeat those two Midianite kings, so why should we feed your worn-out army?'" Gideon made a whip from thorn plants and used it to beat the town officials. Afterwards, he went to Penuel, where he tore down the tower and killed all the town officials. Then Gideon said, "Zeba and Zalmunna, tell me about the men you killed at Tabor." "They were a lot like you," the two kings answered. "They were dignified, almost like royalty." "They were my very own brothers," Gideon said. "I swear by the living Lord that if you had let them live, I would let you live." Gideon turned to Jether, his oldest son. "Kill them," Gideon said. But Jether was young and he was too afraid to even pull out his sword. "What's the matter, Gideon?" Zeba and Zalmunna asked. "Do it yourself if you're not too much of a coward." Gideon jumped up and killed them both. Then he took the gold ornaments from the necks of their camels. After the battle with the Midianites, the Israelites said, "Gideon, you rescued us. Now we want you to be our king. Then after your death, your son and then your grandson will rule." "No," Gideon replied. "I won't be your king, and my son won't be king either. Only the Lord is your ruler. But I will ask you to do one thing. Give me all the earrings you took from the enemy." The enemy soldiers had been Ishmaelites, and they wore gold earrings. The Israelite soldiers replied, "Of course we will give you the earrings." Then they spread out a robe on the ground and tossed the earrings on it. The total weight of this gold was nearly 20 kilograms. In addition, there was the gold from the camel's ornaments, and from the beautiful jewelry worn by the Midianite kings. Gideon also took their purple robes. Gideon returned to his home in Ophrah, and had the gold made into a statue, which the Israelites soon started worshipping. They were unfaithful to God, and even Gideon and his family were trapped into worshipping the statue. The Midianites had been defeated so badly that they were no longer strong enough to attack Israel. And so Israel was at peace for the remaining 40 years of Gideon's life. Gideon had many wives and 70 sons. He even had a wife who lived at Shechem. They had a son, and Gideon named him Abimelech. Gideon lived to be an old man, and when he died, he was buried in the family tomb in his hometown of Ophrah, which belonged to the Abiezer clan. Soon after Gideon's death, the Israelites turned their backs on God again. They set up idols of Baal and worshipped Baal-berith as their god. The Israelites forgot that the Lord was their God, and that he had rescued them from the enemies who lived around them. Besides all that, the Israelites were unkind to Gideon's family, even though Gideon had done so much for Israel. Abimelech. Abimelech was one of Gideon's sons, but his mother was a concubine from Shechem. Wanting to become the ruler, Abimelech went to his mother's relatives in Shechem and asked them whether they'd rather be ruled by all 70 of Gideon's sons or just him, since he was their own flesh and blood. The people of Shechem agreed to support him and gave him 70 pieces of silver from the temple of their god Baal-berith. Abimelech used the money to hire a group of reckless and violent men who followed him. Together they went to Ophrah, Gideon's hometown, and killed his 70 brothers on one stone. Only the youngest brother, Jotham, escaped by hiding. After this, the people of Shechem and Beth Millo gathered and made Abimelech king near the great tree at Shechem. When Jotham heard about it, he climbed Mount Gerizim and shouted a story to warn the people. He told a parable about trees looking for a king. Jotham explained that if the people had acted honestly in choosing Abimelech, then things would go well. But if they had acted wrongly, then Abimelech would destroy them, and they would destroy him. After speaking, Jotham ran away and lived in hiding for fear of Abimelech. Abimelech ruled Israel for 3 years, but God sent trouble between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem, causing them to turn against each other. This happened because God wanted to punish Abimelech for killing his brothers, and the people of Shechem for helping him. The leaders of Shechem began to set up ambushes on the mountain roads to rob and attack people, spreading unrest in the region. Around that time, a man named Gal and his family moved into Shechem. The people trusted him, and during a festival in the temple of their god, they got drunk and started speaking against Abimelech. Gal bragged that he could defeat Abimelech and asked why they should serve him at all. Zebul, the ruler of the city who supported Abimelech, secretly sent messengers to warn Abimelech about Gal's plans. Abimelech came by night with his men and set an ambush around the city. When Gal went out the next morning and saw people on the hills, Zebul pretended they were just shadows. But as more soldiers appeared, Zebul told Gal to go fight if he was truly so confident. Gal and his men went out to fight Abimelech, but were defeated and chased back to the city. Zebul drove Gal and his relatives out of Shechem. The next day, people from Shechem went out to work in the fields, and Abimelech attacked them. He divided his men into 3 groups and ambushed the people in the fields, killing many. Then he captured the city, killed the people, tore down the city, and scattered salt over it to keep anything from growing there. Some of the leaders of Shechem took refuge in the strong tower of the temple of Baal-berith. When Abimelech found out, he gathered wood and told his men to pile it around the tower and set it on fire. About 1,000 men and women inside the tower died in the flames. After this, Abimelech went to Thebez and captured it, but the people there also ran into a strong tower. When Abimelech approached the door to set it on fire, a woman dropped a heavy millstone from the tower, crushing his skull. Realizing he was dying and not wanting people to say he was killed by a woman, Abimelech called his armor-bearer and ordered him to kill him with a sword. So the young man killed him, and Abimelech died. When the Israelites saw that Abimelech was dead, they all went home. God punished Abimelech for the evil he had done to his brothers, and also punished the people of Shechem for their own wickedness, fulfilling Jotham's warning. Tola. Tola was the next person to rescue Israel. He belonged to the Issachar tribe, but he lived in Shamir, a town in the hill country of Ephraim. His father was Puah, and his grandfather was Dodo. Tola was a leader of Israel for 23 years. Then he died and was buried in Shamir. Jair. The next leader of Israel was Jair, who lived in Gilead. He was a leader for 22 years. He had 30 sons, and each son had his own mule and was in charge of one town in Gilead. Those 30 towns are still called the settlements of Jair. When he died, he was buried in the town of Kamon. Before long, the Israelites began disobeying the Lord by worshipping Baal, Astarte, and gods from Syria, Sidon, Moab, Ammon, and Philistia. The Lord was angry with Israel and decided to let Philistia and Ammon conquer them. So the same year that Jair died, Israel's army was crushed by these 2 nations. For 18 years, Ammon was cruel to the Israelites who lived in Gilead, the region east of the Jordan River that had once belonged to the Amorites. Then the Ammonites began crossing the Jordan and attacking the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Ephraim. Life was miserable for the Israelites. They begged the Lord for help and confessed, "We were unfaithful to you, our Lord. We stopped worshiping you and started worshiping idols of Baal." The Lord answered, "In the past, when you came crying to me for help, I rescued you. At one time or another, I've rescued you from the Egyptians, the Amorites, the Ammonites, the Philistines, the Sidonians, the Amalekites, and the Maonites. But I'm not going to rescue you anymore. You've left me and gone off to worship other gods. If you're in such big trouble, go and cry to them for help." "We have been unfaithful to you," the Israelites admitted. "If we must be punished, do it yourself. But please rescue us from the Ammonites." Then the Israelites got rid of the idols of the foreign gods, and they began worshiping only the Lord. Finally, there came a time when the Lord could no longer stand to see them suffer. The rulers of Ammon called their soldiers together and led them to Gilead, where they set up camp. The Israelites gathered at Mizpah and set up camp there. The leaders of Gilead asked each other, "Who can lead an attack on the Ammonites?" Then they agreed, "If we find someone who can lead the attack, we'll make him the ruler of Gilead." The leaders of the Gilead clan decided to ask a brave warrior named Jephthah, son of Gilead, to lead the attack against the Ammonites. Even though Jephthah belonged to the Gilead clan, he had earlier been forced to leave the region where they had lived. Jephthah was the son of a prostitute, but his half-brothers were the sons of his father's wife. His half-brothers, ashamed of him, drove him out of their family so he wouldn't share in their father's inheritance. Cast out, Jephthah fled to the land of Tob, where he gathered a band of followers, adventurers who rallied around him. Years passed, and trouble came upon Israel. The Ammonites waged war against Gilead, and the elders, desperate for a leader, remembered Jephthah's strength. They journeyed to Tob and pleaded with him to return and lead them into battle. Jephthah questioned their motives. "Didn't you hate me and drive me away? Why come to me now in your time of trouble?" But the elders insisted, promising to make him their head if he would deliver them. Jephthah agreed and returned to Mizpah as their commander and leader. Before going to war, Jephthah tried peace first. He sent messengers to the king of Ammon, asking why he attacked Israel. The king claimed Israel had stolen his lands when coming out of Egypt. But Jephthah responded with a long message, recounting Israel's journey through the wilderness. He explained how Israel had taken land not from the Ammonites, but from the Amorites, after being refused passage. He declared that Israel had possessed the land for hundreds of years and had no reason to give it up. Yet the king of Ammon ignored Jephthah's words. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah. As he prepared for battle, he made a solemn vow to God. "If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering." Jephthah went to war and crushed the Ammonites, striking them down from city to city. Israel was saved, and Jephthah returned home victorious. But as he approached his house, joy turned to horror, for the first to come dancing out to greet him was his only child, his beloved daughter, playing a tambourine and rejoicing at his victory. "Oh no," Jephthah cried. Then he tore his clothes in sorrow and said to his daughter, "I made a sacred promise to the Lord, and I must keep it. Your coming out to meet me has broken my heart." "Father," she said, "you made a sacred promise to the Lord, and he let you defeat the Ammonites. Now you must do what you promised, even if it means I must die. But first, please let me spend 2 months wandering in the hill country with my friends. We will cry together because I can never get married and have children." "Yes, you may have 2 months," Jephthah said. She and some other girls left, and for 2 months they wandered in the hill country, crying because she could never get married and have children. Then she went back to her father. He did what he had promised, and she never got married. After Jephthah's victory, the men of Ephraim angrily accused him of leaving them out of the fight and threatened to burn his house down. Jephthah replied that he'd called them, but they didn't come, so he fought the Ammonites himself. A battle broke out between Jephthah's Gileadites and the Ephraimites. The Gileadites seized the Jordan River crossings and used a test word, Shibboleth, to catch fleeing Ephraimites, who mispronounced it as Sibboleth. Because of this, 42,000 Ephraimites were killed. Jephthah ruled Israel for 6 years, then died and was buried in Gilead. Ibzan. Ibzan, the next leader of Israel, came from Bethlehem. He had 30 daughters and 30 sons, and he let them all marry outside his clan. Ibzan was a leader for 7 years, before he died and was buried in Bethlehem. Elon. Elon from the Zebulun tribe was the next leader of Israel. He was a leader for 10 years before he died and was buried in Aijalon that belonged to the Zebulun tribe. Abdon. Abdon, the son of Hillel, was the next leader of Israel. He had 40 sons and 30 grandsons, and each one of them had his own donkey. Abdon was a leader for 8 years before he died and was buried in his hometown of Pirathon, which is located in the part of the hill country of Ephraim where Amalekites used to live. Samson. Once again the Israelites started disobeying the Lord, so he let the Philistines take control of Israel for 40 years. Manoah from the tribe of Dan lived in the town of Zorah. His wife was not able to have children, but one day an angel from the Lord appeared to her and said, "You have never been able to have any children, but very soon you will be pregnant and have a son. He will belong to God from the day he is born, so his hair must never be cut. And even before he is born, you must not drink any wine or beer or eat any food forbidden by God's laws. Your son will begin to set Israel free from the Philistines." She went to Manoah and said, "A prophet who looked like an angel of God came and talked to me. I was so frightened that I didn't even ask where he was from. He didn't tell me his name, but he did say that I'm going to have a baby boy. I'm not supposed to drink any wine or beer, or eat any food forbidden by God's laws, Our son will belong to God for as long as he lives." Then Manoah prayed, "Our Lord, please send that prophet again, and let him tell us what to do for the son we are going to have." God answered Manoah's prayer, and the angel went back to Manoah's wife while she was resting in the fields. Manoah wasn't there at the time, so she found him and said, "That same man is here again. He's the one I saw the other day." Manoah went with his wife and asked the man, "Are you the one who spoke to my wife?" "Yes, I am," he answered. Manoah then asked, "When your promise comes true, what rules must he obey and what will be his work?" "Your wife must be careful to do everything I told her," the Lord's angel answered. "She must not eat or drink anything made from grapes. She must not drink wine or beer or eat anything forbidden by God's laws. I told her exactly what to do." "Please," Manoah said, "stay here with us for just a little while and we'll fix a young goat for you to eat." Manoah didn't realize that he was really talking to one of the Lord's angels. The angel answered, "I can stay for a little while, although I won't eat any of your food. But if you would like to offer the goat as a sacrifice to the Lord, that would be fine." Manoah said, "Tell us your name so we can honor you after our son is born." "No," the angel replied. "You don't need to know my name, and if you did, you couldn't understand it." So Manoah took a young goat over to a large rock he had chosen for an altar, and he built a fire on the rock. Then he killed the goat and offered it with some grain as a sacrifice to the Lord. But then, an amazing thing happened. The fire blazed up toward the sky, and the Lord's angel went up toward heaven in the fire. Manoah and his wife bowed down low when they saw what happened. Although the angel didn't appear to them again, they realized he was one of the Lord's angels. Manoah said, "We have seen an angel. Now we're going to die." "The Lord isn't going to kill us," Manoah's wife responded. "The Lord accepted our sacrifice and grain offering, and he let us see something amazing. Besides, he told us that we're going to have a son." Later, Manoah's wife did give birth to a son, and she named him Samson. As the boy grew, the Lord blessed him. Then, while Samson was staying at Dan's camp between the towns of Zorah and Eshtaol, the Spirit of the Lord took control of him. One day, Samson went to Timnah, where he saw a Philistine woman. When he got back home, he told his parents, "I saw a Philistine woman in Timnah and I want to marry her. Get her for me." His parents answered, "There are a lot of women in our clan, and even more in the rest of Israel. Those Philistines are pagans. Why would you want to marry one of their women?" "She looks good to me," Samson answered. "Get her for me." At that time, the Philistines were in control of Israel, and the Lord wanted to stir up trouble for them. That's why he made Samson desire that woman. As Samson and his parents reached the vineyards near Timnah, a fierce young lion suddenly roared and attacked Samson. But the Lord's Spirit took control of Samson, and with his bare hands he tore the lion apart, as though it had been a young goat. His parents didn't know what he had done, and he didn't tell them. When they got to Timnah, Samson talked to the woman, and he was sure that she was the one for him. Later, Samson returned to Timnah for the wedding, and when he came near the place where the lion had attacked, he left the road to see what was left of the lion. He was surprised to see that bees were living in the lion's skeleton, and that they had made some honey. He scooped up the honey in his hands, and ate some of it as he walked along. When he got back to his parents, he gave them some of the honey, and they ate it too. But he didn't tell them he had found the honey in the skeleton of a lion. While Samson's father went to make the final arrangements with the bride and her family, Samson threw a big party, as grooms usually did. When the Philistines saw what Samson was like, they told 30 of their young men to stay with him at the party. Samson told the 30 young men, "This party will last for 7 days. Let's make a bet. I'll tell you a riddle, and if you can tell me the answer before the party is over, I'll give each of you a shirt and a full change of clothing. But if you can't tell me the answer, then each of you will have to give me a shirt and a full change of clothing." "It's a bet," the Philistines said. "Tell us the riddle." Samson said, "Once so strong and mighty, now so sweet and tasty." 3 days went by, and the Philistine young men had not come up with the right answer. Finally, on the 7th day of the party, they went to Samson's bride and said, "You had better trick your husband into telling you the answer to his riddle. Have you invited us here just to rob us? If you don't find out the answer, We will burn you and your family to death." Samson's bride went to him and started crying in his arms. "You must really hate me," she sobbed. "If you loved me at all, you would have told me the answer to your riddle." "But I haven't even told my parents the answer," Samson replied. "Why should I tell you?" For the entire 7 days of the party, she had been whining and trying to get the answer from him. But that 7th day, she put so much pressure on Samson that he finally gave in and told her the answer. She went straight to the young men and told them. Before sunset that day, the men of the town went to Samson with this answer: "A lion is the strongest. Honey is the sweetest." Samson replied, "This answer you have given me doubtless came from my bride-to-be." Then the Lord's Spirit took control of Samson. He went to Ashkelon, where he killed 30 men and took their clothing. Samson then gave it to the 30 young men at Timnah and stormed back home to his own family. The father of the bride made Samson's wife marry one of the 30 young men that had been at Samson's party. Later, during the wheat harvest, Samson went to visit the young woman he thought was still his wife. He brought along a young goat as a gift and said to her father, "I want to go into my wife's bedroom." "You can't do that," he replied. "When you left the way you did, I thought you were divorcing her. So I arranged for her to marry one of the young men who were at your party. But my younger daughter is even prettier, and you can have her as your wife." "This time," Samson answered, "I have a good reason for really hurting some Philistines." Samson went out and caught 300 foxes and tied them together in pairs with oil-soaked rags around their tails. Then Samson took the foxes into the Philistine wheat fields that were ready to be harvested. He set the rags on fire and let the foxes go. The wheat fields went up in flames, and so did the stacks of wheat that had already been cut. Even the Philistine vineyards and olive orchards burned. Some of the Philistines started asking around, who could have done such a thing? "It was Samson," someone told them. "He married the daughter of that man in Timnah." But then the man gave Samson's wife to one of the men at the wedding. The Philistine leaders went to Timnah and burned to death Samson's wife and her father. When Samson found out what they had done, he went to them and said, "You killed them, and I won't rest until I get even with you." Then Samson started hacking them to pieces with his sword. Samson left Philistia and went to live in the cave at Etam Rock. But it wasn't long before the Philistines invaded Judah and set up a huge army camp at Jawbone. The people of Judah asked, "Why have you invaded our land?" The Philistines answered, "We've come to get Samson. We're going to do the same things to him that he did to our people." 3,000 men from Judah went to the cave at Etam Rock and said to Samson, "Don't you know that the Philistines rule us, and they will punish us for what you did?" "I was only getting even with them," Samson replied. "They did the same things to me first." "We came here to tie you up and turn you over to them," said the men of Judah. "I won't put up a fight," Samson answered, "but you have to promise not to hurt me yourselves." "We promise," the men said. "We will only tie you up and turn you over to the Philistines. We won't kill you." Then they tied up his hands and arms with 2 brand new ropes and led him away from Etam Rock. When the Philistines saw that Samson was being brought to their camp at Jawbone, they started shouting and ran toward him. But the Lord's Spirit took control of Samson, and Samson broke the ropes, as though they were pieces of burnt cloth. Samson glanced around and spotted the jawbone of a donkey. The jawbone had not yet dried out, so it was still hard and heavy. Samson grabbed it and started hitting Philistines. He killed 1,000 of them. After the fighting was over, he made up this poem about what he had done to the Philistines. "I used a donkey's jawbone to kill 1,000 men. I beat them with this jawbone over and over again." Samson tossed the jawbone on the ground and decided to call the place Jawbone Hill. It is still called that today. Samson was so thirsty that he prayed, "Our Lord, you helped me win a battle against a whole army. Please don't let me die of thirst now. Those heathen Philistines will carry off my dead body." Samson was tired and weary, but God sent water gushing from a rock. Samson drank some and felt strong again. Samson named the place Collar Spring because he had called out to God for help. The spring is still there at Jawbone. Samson was a leader of Israel for 20 years, but the Philistines were still the rulers of Israel. One day while Samson was in Gaza, he saw a prostitute and went to her house to spend the night. The people who lived in Gaza found out he was there, and they decided to kill him at sunrise. So they went to the city gate and waited all night in the guard rooms on each side of the gate. But Samson got up in the middle of the night and went to the town gate. He pulled the gate doors and doorposts out of the wall and put them on his shoulders. Then he carried them all the way to the top of the hill that overlooks Hebron, where he set the doors down, still closed and locked. Some time later, Samson fell in love with a woman named Delilah who lived in Sorek Valley. The Philistine rulers went to Delilah and said, "Trick Samson into telling you what makes him so strong and what can make him weak. Then we can tie him up so he can't get away. If you find out his secret, we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver." The next time Samson was at Delilah's house, she asked, "Samson, what makes you so strong? How can I tie you up so you can't get away? Come on, you can tell me." Samson answered, "If someone ties me up with 7 new bowstrings that have never been dried, it will make me just as weak as anyone else." The Philistine rulers gave 7 new bowstrings to Delilah. They also told some of their soldiers to go to Delilah's house and hide in the room where Samson and Delilah were. If the bowstrings made Samson weak, they would be able to capture him. Delilah tied up Samson with the bowstrings and shouted, "Samson, the Philistines are attacking." Samson snapped the bowstrings, as though they were pieces of scorched string. The Philistines had not found out why Samson was so strong. "You lied and made me look like a fool," Delilah said. "Now tell me, how can I really tie you up?" Samson answered, "Use some new ropes. If I'm tied up with ropes that have never been used, I'll be just as weak as anyone else." Delilah got new ropes, and again some Philistines hid in the room. Then she tied up Samson's arms and shouted, "Samson, the Philistines are attacking!" Samson snapped the ropes as if they were threads. "You're still lying and making a fool of me," Delilah said. "Tell me how I can tie you up." "My hair is in 7 braids, Samson replied. "If you weave my braids into the threads on a loom and nail the loom to a wall, then I will be as weak as anyone else." While Samson was asleep, Delilah wove his braids into the threads on a loom and nailed the loom to a wall. Then she shouted, "Samson, the Philistines are attacking!" Samson woke up and pulled the loom free from the wall. "Samson," Delilah said, "you claim to love me, but you don't mean it. You've made me look like a fool 3 times now, and you still haven't told me why you are so strong." Delilah started nagging and pestering him day after day, until he couldn't stand it any longer. Finally, Samson told her the truth. "I have belonged to God ever since I was born, so my hair has never been cut. If it were ever cut off, my strength would leave me, and I would be as weak as anyone else." Delilah realized that he was telling the truth, so she sent someone to tell the Philistine rulers, "Come to my house one more time. Samson has finally told me the truth." The Philistine rulers went to Delilah's house, and they brought along the silver they had promised her. Delilah had lulled Samson to sleep with his head resting in her lap. She signaled to one of the Philistine men as she began cutting off Samson's 7 braids. And by the time she was finished, Samson's strength was gone. Delilah tied him up and shouted, "Samson, the Philistines are attacking." Samson woke up and thought, "I'll break loose and escape, just as I always do." He did not realize that the Lord had stopped helping him. The Philistines grabbed Samson and poked out his eyes. They took him to the prison in Gaza and chained him up. Then they put him to work, turning a millstone to grind grain. But they didn't cut his hair anymore, so it started growing back. The Philistines gathered to celebrate their god Dagon for delivering Samson into their hands. During the feast, they brought Samson out of prison to mock him. Blind and humiliated, Samson asked a servant to place him between the 2 central pillars of the temple. He prayed to God for strength one last time and pushed against the pillars with all his might. The temple collapsed, killing everyone inside, including Samson himself. In his death, he killed more Philistines than he had in his life. His family later retrieved his body and buried him in his father's tomb.